Thank you so much for jumping on this morning, Margo. I had put the call out to several people for my first podcast, and thankfully, I've received a bunch of favorable responses, but you were the first one to respond. So you are lucky
Yay.
number one. Thank you. Thank you for your time. So, Margo, we've done a number of deals with you over the years, but tell us who you are, and more importantly, whoever has the privilege of tuning into this fine podcast. Who is Margo McDonnell? What is 1031 Corp? And I recently read your history somewhere. I forget exactly where it was, but I read that I believe you assumed control or ownership of the company from possibly a previous employer.
Yes. So, I'm Margo McDonnell with 1031 Corp. We are a 1031 exchange qualified intermediary based in Pennsylvania, but we do transactions nationwide. We just acquired a friendly competitor at the Jersey Shore, and have an office in the Pacific Northwest as well. I have been with the company for 32 of the 35 years, and I was fortunate when I came on board. I had a boss that allowed me to run this company like it was my own. It was before I was married, before I had children. So I always say this was my first baby. And we were just doing our thing. And in 2004, so 10 years after I joined the company, we were actually acquired by First American Title, and we became an affiliate of First American Title. And in 2010, after asking multiple times, they allowed me to take the company back. So I reached out to my old boss and said, "Hey, do you want to do this again?" And he came on as a partner, as well as Sue Umstead, who I had worked with she retired in year 24, but for a really long time. And just earlier this year, I was able to buy out my partner. And now we're 100% women owned. And I still have the pleasure of having Sue as my partner. So that's
Awesome.
a little bit about our history.
I
But
appreciate that.
1031 Corp is a qualified intermediary, and we facilitate 1031 exchanges. That's our only business. And one of the advantages of the history of our company is I worked with that regional title company for a while, and then that big national title company, part of a Fortune 500 company. But I had the benefit of all the things that I thought worked and didn't work about the way they ran their businesses. And I get to make decisions now because they make sense for the client transaction, for our team members. And I love it. I wouldn't change a thing.
That's awesome. And I mentioned I had a technology snafu, and there's a rather dated whiteboard behind me. I don't know if you can read that,
I
but
can see.
there's also a human back there who is Luke. Stand up and say hello.
Hi, how are you?
I don't know if
How
you
you
can.
doing, Margo?
I don't know if you can hear him or
Hi,
not.
Luke.
Yeah, I cannot hear you, but I hope you're doing well.
Luke is our intern from Westchester University.
Yes.
Nice.
So I
Nice.
just wanted to mention the background's not as I anticipated, but here we are.
Yeah.
So a 1031 exchange. I know what it is. We've worked together, but help me. What's kind of 1031 for dummies version?
Yes. So 1031 exchanges is the way for any business use or investment owner to sell their property, defer all the gain, and roll it into their next property. So if you owned a single family rental property, for example, you would normally sell and have to pay capital gain taxes and recapture all your depreciation. A 1031 exchange allows you to buy another property of equal or greater value and reinvest all your equity. So you are essentially taking everything from your old property and shifting it into your new property. That gives you greater buying power and keeps your money working for you.
And you don't get out of the tax. The tax is delayed, if you will.
That is correct. It is a tax deferral, not a complete tax avoidance, but it's important to know that you could do exchange after exchange and continue to grow your real estate with pre-tax dollars. And somewhere down the line, if you decide, I want to just sell and pay the tax, you can do that. But if you hold the property for the rest of your life and you pass away, your heirs receive all of your assets, including that 1031 replacement property, with a step up in basis, meaning they inherit it at the fair market value based on the date of death. And all the gain that you deferred during your lifetime using 1031 exchanges is all forgiven. So it's not only a great way for you to build wealth and preserve all that equity, but you could potentially pass it to your heirs without any capital gains. Now, remember, it's only the first $15 million that's exempt from estate taxes, but $15 million is still a big number for a lot of people. So it's a great way to pass that wealth on.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, really the best time to sell for tax efficiency, because of course we would never want to avoid taxes, but tax efficiency is important. The best time to sell is really right after you would pass away.
If they want to, if it's a great property,
But the best time to
then
cash out, if
the
you will.
advantage, right, exactly. But the advantage for your heirs, if they do want to keep the property, is the basis has been reset.
Right.
So the tax liability is all gone. And if they want to hold on to it, they can, or they can sell and pocket all the cash from that
And I
and
just
deploy it somewhere else.
I love lawyers, and in fact, I think a bus full of lawyers going off of a cliff is a good start. I just want to be clear: we're not giving any financial or tax advice today. Everybody listening should seek their own independent advice from their trusted advisor.
Absolutely. I
This
would
is
be the
strictly
first one to say that a 1031 is a great tax strategy, but it's not the right strategy in every situation. And that's where your tax or legal advisors are invaluable.
absolutely, and anybody listening should seek their own independent advice from their trusted advisor. Margo, I sent out just a little outline, so I'm just going to peek over here. I remember when we first started working together, it would have been in excess of 20 years ago when I was new in the business and I was at Source Realty Group, and we had a mutual client. And I remember very, very vividly, I forget what they sold, but I can tell you what they bought because I was involved in that. They bought a small mixed use property down in Kennett Square, and you handled the exchange. So we've been working together in excess of 20 years.
I love to hear things like that.
So what's going on in your business, your career, your company, and what's your current focus right now?
Well, I think if we talk about the company, it's really the same as what's going on in real estate. It's interesting times. I think that we're starting to see people feeling more comfortable with interest rates, knowing that this is about normal for us now. We got a little taste of the really low rates, but we all know that's not usually realistic. This is more normal. So we are simply working hard to integrate our new Ocean City business into our existing business and really just continue our quest to educate people on 1031 exchanges and remind them that it's a good time all the time to think about what is working for you and not working for you. We've learned over the years that people don't do a 1031 exchange just to defer the taxes. That's one of the benefits of doing an exchange, but their goal is something else, whether it's diversify or consolidate or to relocate, expand a business. And 1031 is actually just the vehicle to help you get there. So in our world, we just continue to educate people on 1031s and what I call the power of 1031. And we are just continuing to have fun like we always do.
I was recently involved in a transaction where the seller had no debt on the property, had owned the property about 20 years, got an offer pretty close to asking, and their eyeballs fell out of their head when they saw what they were going to pay in capital gains. And I said, you can do an exchange. And they were not super interested in an exchange. And I had, sent them your website and recommended they speak with you, or, and the idea of ownership or owning a management intensive property was really not for them. So there's other options out there like the DST or the Delaware Statutory Trust. And I know you give various lectures and seminars, in conjunction with some of the DST providers. So what we did, we're working on putting the deal back together. And actually, he's going to provide seller financing, which is going to make up some of that difference that's going to be, eaten up by the capital gains. So to your point earlier, an exchange is not always appropriate or the best choice. But sometimes if you get creative, there are other options out there as well. And in this case, a 5-year note with seller financing is going to help make up a lot of the ground that he's going to lose with the capital gains exposure.
Right. And honestly, that is the blog post that I was working on this morning before I talked to you. So
Oh,
you'll
interesting.
see that posted this week on our website. And it's just a creative way to actually do an installment sale and do a 1031 exchange, assuming that that's what you want to do, because the 1031 exchange will allow you to defer the gain indefinitely. But that installment note, while it does make the tax liability a little bit more palatable, but you're only deferring it over the next 5 years.
Right.
So if there's a balloon payment at the end, there's no way to really defer that. So one of the things that we sometimes people do, especially if they have the means to buy that note. So for example, if your seller, I'm just going to make up nice easy numbers, but your seller sells for $1 million and the note is for $700,000, then they could, if they had the $700,000, they could actually just bring that money to closing, be the lender on the closing statement. Now, all the money is available to do a 1031 exchange, so they get to defer all the gain, still have this installment note as another investment with 100% basis in it. So there are some creative ways to do it and still make it work for a 1031 exchange too. But again, you have to decide what's right for you, and that's why your tax advisors are very helpful.
Absolutely. So what's getting you excited these days?
I had to tell you, Chuck, I love what I do. So the opportunity to educate people on the power of 1031 and realize what they can do it is always what keeps me motivated. But I look at the market, which is a little challenging, as a challenge. And what can we do to take advantage of this time to help people realize what they can do if they did a 1031 exchange? Because oftentimes people are sitting on a property that doesn't work for them anymore. It was
Hmm.
perfect when they bought it 20 years ago or 10 years ago. But now it's just not doing what they wanted it to do. And it's always a good opportunity to buy something that's going to create better cash flow for you or just better fit your long-term goals. And regardless of the market conditions, sometimes when the market is a little flat, that's a great time to go out and look for what you really want, because sometimes there's a little less competition to get those properties. So
And
they're the things that excite me.
the other thing that you alluded to is people, and this client that I mentioned a minute ago, they have this perception that they have these golden handcuffs, if you will. I'm tied to this property because the tax burden is so great. It may not be as burdensome as one may think, but until they kind of roll up their sleeves and get in the weeds with you and your advisors and, resources that you bring to the table to look at
Exactly.
alternatives. And to your point as well, if the property doesn't work for them or doesn't serve their needs or, doesn't serve their needs into the future, there are options to get into a property that better serves the needs, or maybe it's not a property. It might be a DST, which is a fractional ownership in more of an institutional grade property.
Exactly. And remember, there are some great property managers out there, but I always think of, when I talk to different clients, really, what is your long-term plan? And is a 1031 exchange a vehicle to help you get there? And I know there's a lot of misconceptions about 1031, but I always use the example of your retirement account. We all pay attention to what's going on in our retirement accounts. And if we look at the different funds that we have our money allocated to, if one fund is not performing well, we have the ability to move money, some or all money from that fund to a different fund that we think will create a better return for us, because that's obviously best for our retirement. And we can do that all tax deferred within our retirement plan, within that IRA or 401k, whatever you have. And people do that all the time, but nobody stops to think that 1031 is actually the way to do it for real estate. And they just never put those pieces together. And we move the money around in our retirement account, but we don't really think about doing it with our real estate investments, which quite frankly are design, the goal is to help pay for that future retirement or give us all the lifestyle that we want.
Absolutely. What's keeping you busy? What are your challenges that you're seeing, and as well as opportunities?
The opportunity to to help people see different ways that 1031 could benefit them. If I am meeting with a client, and I probably alluded to this already, I don't want to just tell you the rules. You could read that on the web. What I want to do is learn about your property, why did you buy it, and what are your goals moving forward, and help you see whether or not this might be a vehicle to help you get there. One of the misconceptions about 1031 is that like kind means I have to buy the same kind of property. I think of like kind is the part of 1031 that gives us the most flexibility, because like kind refers to the use of the property, not the specific type of property. So you can mix and match any kind of properties. I worked with an investor a few years ago who sold 146 single family rentals to buy one replacement property.
Wow.
And think about how life-changing that was for him. I think about the people I work with a lot of doctors who are selling their practice, but they happen to own the office building or the office condo that they are based in. And I talked to one dentist who had an office building that had 4 medical condos in it, and he was selling the whole building when he retired. And fortunately for him, he had a great broker. And I sat down with him and his broker. And the first thing I said is, okay, well, congratulations. What do you want to do now? And he told me he had just had his first granddaughter. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And he said, well, she's in Denver. And I said, okay, well, so you want to spend time in Denver. So ultimately, he used his 1031 proceeds to invest in a triple net lease property, which was passive. And he bought a residential condo in downtown Denver that he would use as a rental property for at least 2 years, and then use it as a second home and maybe eventually move there. And one of the things people don't really think about is 1031 isn't just for commercial properties. Is also for residential properties. And the more you understand how it works, the more creative you can get. And, eventually that dentist was able to sell his primary residence in Pennsylvania, take his $500,000 exclusion, and move into that property he acquired in Denver. And it was a win-win. And if his broker wasn't proactive and I didn't ask a lot of questions about the long-term goals, he would have just put it all into an investment property, that triple net lease property that he purchased. And this actually helped him, plan his next step and eventually move into that property, which you can do after 2 years.
Okay.
I've seen landowners sell to, a developer, a builder who was going to build homes on that property. I worked with 3 older brothers who owned property, and they sold it to one of the big developers. And each one of those brothers had a tenant in common interest in that property. That allowed each of them to do whatever they wanted with their 1/3 of it. And one of them, the older one, paid the tax. He was in his 80s. The other 2 brothers were in their 70s. And they owned this property for, 40 years. They never did anything other than pay taxes and have a liability policy on it. And the other 2 brothers each bought, this was a few years ago, but they bought 7-Elevens in Florida as a triple net lease. And the one brother, I loved it. He would call me every month and say, Margo, I got a check. This is so great. But you almost wish that they would have known about the 1031 exchange
Right.
10 years ago or 20
Exactly.
years ago. And I kind of love it because eventually, they passed away, and I see one of their son's number pop up on our caller ID. So the son inherited the property, and then he eventually, after a while, he held on to it. He started doing 1031 exchange with it. So here's the next generation that's continuing to invest, and all of that wealth it all got transferred to the kids.
That's amazing. There's a lot of nuances and some very, very technical rules in your business, which I won't pretend to be an expert in.
Oh,
But
you
one of
know
the,
more than you think, Chuck.
thank you. One of the most fundamental rules that's very, very important, if not one of the most important rules, is that the seller or the person completing the exchange
Yes.
cannot take possession of those funds. So you can't go to settlement and then the next day decide you want to do an exchange. So it's really,
That
really,
is
really important to talk with you if you're even considering an exchange, because one of the fundamental requirements is that the money needs to go to a qualified intermediary like 1031
yes.
Corp.
Yes. So you can actually initiate an exchange all the way up to sitting at closing and say, wait, Chuck, you told me about 1031s. I think I want to do it. And while the initial reaction might be like, oh boy, call us because we can get everything set up and it will work perfectly for your client. But I always tell people, think of the 1031 when you're considering selling your property and start looking for replacement property while your property is on the market. Because quite frankly, that's the hardest part of the exchange. I have the easy part, Chuck. You have the hard part because you have to help them find what they're looking for. But if you start early, then you're maximizing your time. But I always tell people, call me during that time. I have someone I talked to yesterday. He hasn't even listed, but he's starting to think about that. And then you can, once you have that property under contract, that's when it's time to initiate your 1031 exchange. And like you said, if you go through closing and you walk out and you're in the parking lot and you tell your client, hey, just you should get a notice shortly saying that the wire hit your account. Well, then it's too late. Once they have control of the money, it's too late. If they could turn around and walk back into the closing agent and say, wait, I don't know what I'm going to do with 1031. They're already in control. If they could tell the closing agent what to do with that money, they are in control of it. So,
So
yes.
let's just, at a 10,000 foot view, let's walk through the process. And then I also want to talk about what happens if the exchange is not completed. So I want to sell this building I'm in right now. I find a buyer, I go to settlement, you're involved early on. I instruct the title company to send the sale proceeds to you as my intermediary. What would I expect from there? Then I'm looking for a replacement property.
Right. It's actually much easier than that. You don't have to tell the title company anything. We're going to take care of that. So as a qualified intermediary, we're an independent third party. We can't be their real estate professional, their attorney, their accountant, financial advisor, or a close relative. So it's someone that they really have no control over. And we get involved prior to them going to closing. We'll put together that 1031 exchange agreement. We will also set up a bank account to hold their funds. 1031 Corp will set up a segregated account with their name and their taxpayer identification number attached to that. We can provide 100% FDIC insurance as well as additional security on those funds. We also make sure they can log right onto the bank's website, see their account balance anytime, and they get a statement from the bank at the end of each month. So we set up that bank account and then we send instructions to the closing agent. And one of the things we'll do is provide those wire instructions to that bank account. So you go to closing, you sign all your papers just like you normally would. You transfer title to your property to the buyer just like normal. And then the closing agent will wire those funds to that new bank account. And then your timelines will start. Beginning on the day you closed on your old property, you have 45 days to identify a new property in writing to your qualified intermediary. You don't need a property under contract, but you can't change it after day 45. So my advice is always get something under contract, give yourself some peace of mind. But I tell you, I see people all the time, they list 3 different properties and then they're trying to figure it out afterwards. You have to decide what's best for you. But once that 45-day period starts running at the same time, you have 180 days to buy whatever you want and wrap it up. When you need your earnest money deposit, we will allow you can take that money out of your exchange account. We'll send you a disbursement authorization. So that earnest money deposit will be super easy. And when you're ready to buy the new property, we will send the closing agent instructions and work with you to transfer all your funds to that closing agent. It's actually a pretty easy process. And one of the advantage of the requirement of a qualified intermediary is we're going to guide you through each step of the transaction. So it's very easy.
Awesome. Now, let's say I have a couple questions. Let's say I don't find anything that I want to buy and I just want to go ahead and pay the taxes. What does that look like?
So if you decide not to identify something, then on the first business day after the end of your 45-day identification period, we can work with you to transfer your funds to your account, to your personal account. We can send a check, we
Okay.
can wire, whatever's easiest for you. And yes, it becomes a taxable event. If they
And
identified something and then for whatever reason couldn't acquire it or decided not to, then because they've identified something, we do have to hold the funds until the end of the 180 days. And then the next business day, we release those funds. And again, it becomes taxable to them. Depending on their tax year. So if it's a typical, someone you or I, we own it in our individual names. We have a April 15th tax due date. Then if our 1031 exchange failed for whatever reason, or we had excess funds, let's say, and they were released on day 180, and that's in 2027, our exchange is actually reported on our 26 return normally. But if we have a failed exchange, we could actually report it as an installment sale because we didn't get the money in 26, we got the money in 27. So if we wanted to, we could defer the gain that way until our 27 tax return.
that gives you a little bit more time to maybe figure out
To
some
plan.
losses somewhere else. Yeah.
Exactly.
What
Exactly.
what are your fees, or how are you compensated through the process?
Sure. Our fees are really based on the sale price of your old property. If your client's selling your property for, $1 million, you could assume about $1,250 for that.
I
So
know your
it's a
fees are
one-time fee.
they're very
It's pretty
nominal.
nominal. Yes,
Yeah. Awesome. I want to make sure I don't forget this point. How can people find you?
absolutely. They can email me at Margo at 1031corp, so 1031corp.com. Or they can call our office at 800-828-1031. And our website is just 1031corp.com. And you can call and talk to any of our exchange officers, or you can ask for me.
And your website has a ton of resources on there.
Thank you.
And
We
I share
try.
your website with clients several times a month. I'm sending that website out.
Well, I
I
appreciate
want to
that.
start to wrap it up here. I appreciate your time, and it's a Friday. What do you see over the next 6, 12, 24 months?
I think there's a lot of pent up demand to do deals. And I think that we are going to see more people saying, I've waited long enough. It's time to jump off the fence and take advantage of the opportunities now. And I think we will see residential and commercial transactions increase. There's a demand for housing, and not everybody can buy a house. We know the average age is now 38 for the first-time home buyer. So there's a demand for affordable rental options. And more than half of our business is single-family residences or single-family rentals. And
Interesting.
I think that will continue. But obviously, we continue to see a lot of transactions involving multifamily, especially, but also triple net lease property. It's a great opportunity for people to look at what's available and what's working for them and whether or not now is the time to make that move.
Well, thank you so much. And before I let you go, and you have the outline, so hopefully you remember what I'm going to ask you. Give me just a little kind of tidbit about Margo McDonnell. It could be your favorite book, maybe best business advice you've ever received, maybe kind of your biggest business blooper. But what's kind of a little known fact about you,
I think my favorite
or
book is Good to
or
Great.
or something obscure that you would just like to share? Maybe there's a favorite restaurant that you'd like to highlight.
Well, I'll go back to Good to Great for
Okay.
1 second because I do really like it. I think that it doesn't matter how big your team is or how good the CEO is. If you have good processes, like that's the key to everything. One of my first bosses told me, you don't make money sitting behind a desk, right? You make money out learning about your clients, and it doesn't matter how it works when you're there. It matters how it works when you're not there. So that always has stayed with me. Wasn't necessarily a great boss, but there are the tidbits that I always remember. A little known fact about me, when I was in 8th grade, I was voted most reserved.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
little tidbit.
And I also want to point out and highlight how much I enjoy seeing you dominate a male centric and male, how much success you have found in a male dominated business is what I'm trying to say. And
It's a
our
lot
business,
easier today, but 32 years ago, when I showed up at a commercial event, I was often the only female there, and not everybody can appreciate how the times have changed. And I am the mother of 3 daughters who I continue to tell them, just be strong, be confident, and follow your dreams and do what you want to do.
and our business is male dominated, or our industry, which is not something I'm proud of. And it's mainly old white men. And I think there's a lot of room for everybody else.
I
So
I agree.
whatever I can do to beat that drum, I always try to encourage something that, inspires diversity.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And I have been fortunate over the years to build a lot of great relationships with people just like you. And I'm not a pushy salesperson. I want you to, leave knowing that I know what I'm talking about and I could be a great resource for you or your clients. And as you know, one of my daughters has joined the business, and she is out there, and gosh, she is much more fearless than I was at her age. But it is a little
That's
bit different
great.
world than 32 years ago. But I think that male or female, it's a great industry to be a part of, and I love the camaraderie of it.
Hmm.
And while, you know, we both belong to different associations together, and everyone, even though we're competitors, we will all help each other with anything. We really want to be
It's a
allies.
small, tight knit
Yes,
community.
yes, yes. But I certainly appreciate men who are strong allies for women.
Once again, before we sign off, tell us again how people can reach you.
Sure. It's Margo, Margo, at 1031corp.com. So Margo at 1031corp.com. Or you could call our office. It's 800-828-1031. Or go to our website, 1031corp.com. And you can look for me, or you could just call the main phone number and ask for me. And I'm always happy to help.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
I have no idea where this podcast is going to go. A person, Aviva, out in Denver, and I don't even want to attempt her last name. Sonarik, I think is how you say it, but I'm probably butchering that. But I spoke with Aviva. I follow her online, and she has some really, really enlightening content. And she's the one who encouraged me to do this. She's the one who, gave me kind of the bullet point list on how to start. And I have no idea where this is going to go, but I can say that you're number one.
Well, thank you. Well, let's do it again in a year so we could celebrate the success of your podcast.
Well, I appreciate that. And thanks for being on What's Up, Chuck. And hopefully the content is meaningful to the listeners.